Well, welcome. This is Kim Hallen. I'm your host for the Horse Wisdom Virtual Book Club. And tonight we're going to be using chapter 7, which is Fear is a Fickle Friend, as our launching place for discussion. And those of you in the Patreon community know that I also sent a message this morning about a recent event I had here at the farm where some of the participants got to work with their fear of snakes. And there was a really specific process that we used with that was related to the process I wrote about in the book that horses use. So if we want to, we can touch on that and how that kind of played out. But definitely, I think we'll touch on some of the components of what was involved in person with these participants and the snakes that helped some of them. Actually, I think everybody who was there held the snake, which was kind of surprising, since a couple of them came in saying, I don't want anything to do with snakes. There's Kate. Hi, Kate.
Hey.
All right. So you're just in time for the introductions. So we'll go around just like usual, real quickly, state your name, state where you are so that everybody can kind of remember where everybody else is. And if there's anything particular that either from the chapter about fear or just about fear in general that you want to toss out that maybe you want to try to touch on tonight in the conversation, go ahead and feel free to throw that out. If not, that's okay too. But let's go with the order. I think y'all came in. So Barbara, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Sure. Barbara in southeastern Pennsylvania, about an hour west of Philly. And I've known Kim for a while. I do have a companion I'm responsible for, like one gelding, but kind of hang with a herd of 8. They're in different clusters sometimes. I think that's it. And I don't ride. I was never a great rider, but now I'm really enjoying not riding and just being with them.
Awesome. Thank you, Barbara. Glad you're here. And Anna?
I'm Anna Fox, and I am from Central Virginia. I have a horse training business where I try to teach people a little more empathy with their horses and trying to reach out to the showing community that I was a part of for so many years, and just kind of change people's perspectives on that. And I'm also have been a 911 dispatcher for like 15 years now. So that's it. And Barbara, it's interesting. I just side note, my parents are actually from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, both of them. My mom's there tonight visiting my grandmother. So
Oh, wow. That's really close.
I didn't know you guys had that connection.
I know. I'm like, oh, that's funny. Mom's just got there tonight. So
Cool. All right, Jen and Shelley, why don't you introduce yourselves?
Go ahead. I'm Jennifer Johnson, and I live in a suburb north of Atlanta. And we do have a horse, Kiko, and he is quite old, and we do not ride him, but we love him. So
Awesome.
yep, I didn't mean to say that.
And I'm Shelley Schuler, visiting from Kentucky. Rode horses with Jen and Kim in college. And that's how we know each other. So
Awesome.
visiting today. So
I'm so glad you could join us.
yeah, it's wonderful.
All right, Kate.
So yeah, I am in the Triad in North Carolina. I don't have horses myself, but I volunteer with rescue and sanctuary horses, and I have dogs who are being remarkably quiet for now.
Yeah, Kate's dogs usually participate. Like they get excited when we have these Zoom meetings.
Oh, she's perking up now. We'll see.
And Jen, I think we saw your dog at the beginning too. What's your dog's name again?
That's Buddy. Oh, sorry.
Buddy.
Buddy.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
Fozzie Bear is over being a Sphinx.
Okay. All right, good. We got lots of good animal energy tonight.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so what's most intriguing for you guys about talking about with fear? What is what comes to your mind immediately? Any of you?
When I've read this chapter before, and I just like kind of crammed it again before this because I was out chainsawing things in my yard and all of a sudden realized I had 10 minutes before this. So, but the same thing struck me, which is just like I struggle with chronic anxiety. And like last year in particular has been just like tweaked to number 12. So like when I've read this chapter before and again today, I really reflect on kind of this, the way that you talk about how they just kind of obsessively investigate and sort of turn over all the possibilities in their minds and then like come to a decision like, is this neutral or is this not neutral? And I guess I kind of struggle with like how to apply that to my own life because, the main source of my anxiety has now been removed. And like, I feel like my entire nervous system is collapsing the last couple of weeks because it's just like this adrenaline that's been running in the background is not there anymore, which is wonderful. It's fantastic. But I'm like thinking about my own life. I'm like, how, if it is like just a chronic, fearful, like legitimately fearful thing, like how do you sort of turn that into a neutral thing if it's something that you can't change? So I guess that's what's on my mind tonight.
That's a great question. And, I think we have to get a little bit creative when we apply it to like, there's tangible things like a snake or a crocodile or right. There's some tangible things that we could be afraid of, another person, whatever. And something. And then there's like our fears of maybe something happening or, an event or something like that, right? That's not necessarily a tangible thing that we can interact with like physically. So we have to think about how to apply it maybe a little bit differently. But one of the things that I want to mention first is this distinction that's kind of in my mind. And I don't know if it's like, Barbara, maybe too, if this is like readily recognized as, so anxiety is often an unresolved fear, something that it stays with us and we're anxious about it because we haven't been able to resolve it. And also that maybe it's something, usually anxiety is about something in the future. Would you say, Barbara, that I don't want to like, I'm not an expert in this, so I don't know if you have any other thoughts about
Me either. I'm not sure anyone is, but no, yeah, you have a point. Yeah, there could be a lot of it's the anticipatory anxiety.
Yeah.
And something
again.
Although
I'll give this specific
in your nervous system. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
It's a pleasure to be interrupted.
I was going to give this specific example of my situation, which is, I've talked about that I had a brain injury a year ago in June, and I've been waiting for over a year on a Social Security disability determination. So I didn't have any income for over a year, which is just, it's a really fearful situation. And like some people go for years before they get, and mine was approved. It was approved 2 weeks ago. And I'm just like,
Hey.
yeah. Yeah. So it's just like everything has changed. But, so in a situation like that, it's like, that is a legitimate fear. And it wasn't something, it's like I was doing everything that I could to support my case and do the stuff I was supposed to do, but you can't make the government move any faster than they want to move. So like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know. I don't know how that relates to like horse situations, but yeah.
Well, it does actually. And I've had, not the same situation, but I've had a lot of money anxiety since starting my business. Right. And especially when I was starting my business, a tremendous amount of that. And my anxiety at first was often like, I would go to this worst case scenario as if it were real. Like I'm going to be homeless. I'm not going to be able to feed my horses. Just like that panic feeling of, I don't know where the next check's coming from. I don't know if I'm going to get a client, right? There was just this complete unknown and lack of control. And what I had to do was actually take myself, investigate the worst case scenario. I was like, let's say the money doesn't come in and I don't get another job. Am I really going to end up on the street? Now, everyone's situation is different. I knew that if push came to shove, I could call my parents. I had friends that would take me in. I knew people who were not going to let my horses starve. Like, I don't want to be dependent on other people. But when I really had to say, are those fears actually true? Am I going to be homeless and are my horses are going to end up at an auction? It was like, no. Nobody in my life is going to let that happen if I just tell someone I need help. So for me, that was how that was. Like truly investigate, is that actually true? Would I actually ever let it get to that point? Like, I'll go to work at Publix. Like, I don't know. It was like, I would figure out a way to probably not have that happen for me. And that was the process of investigation for me. Now, yours could be different. It could be totally different, but
It
there,
is totally different. I don't have that kind of support. Like, I don't have family and I don't have friends I could ask for, material support. So yeah, I think like, and it does, let's be real, like it does apply to lots of horses, because lots of horses live in incredibly fearful environments where they fear for their lives and they fear for the next person who's going to hurt them. And
so in that, it would be like, if we take it to what horses do, it's almost even more in the immediate moment. It would be right now, is there a roof over my head? Right this minute, do I have something to eat or drink? Right? They would be more like, where do I find my comfort right now in this moment? And they don't even have really the ability to plan ahead. They don't have much control over anything. So they really are like, how do I find my comfort right now? How do I regulate myself? How do I know I'm safe in this moment? And they actually kind of live moment to moment, which is an art that humanity, I think, has largely lost.
yeah.
Completely. I don't know. Anyone else have thoughts on that? That's my initial thought of like how horses would handle that situation.
Yeah, I try to like remind myself of that on the regular, because I have the same anxiety. Like, this is why I'm still part-time 911 dispatching, because the anxiety of not having a backup income like is just overwhelming. And I actually haven't worked in the comm center in 2 months because our September and Octobers are just crazy with family obligations and stuff like that. So I mean, it's every day I'm like, okay, it's fine. Same thing. My husband has a job. He's got a good job. I've got like friends and family and etc. So it's fine. But yeah, and I have to remind myself, like the horses, they would worry, they would have an initial reaction to it and then they would let it go. And that's like the hardest thing as a human, is just to like let it go. And people always, they talk about like spirituality and like, just give it to God or, the universe or whatever. And it's like,
for some people that works.
it's
right?
hard, right?
And it is hard.
Yeah.
But you just really made me think about, we have so much more at stake. We have houses, we have cars, we have things, we have bills, we even have animals that we take care of. The horses, honestly, when it comes down to that level of uncertainty, they really can just be like, okay, I found this quiet spot over here. Nobody's messing with me right now. I'm okay over here. They'll find within the context of their environment, whatever the safest space is for them, and they'll like take sanctuary there, but they're not having to think about all the other responsibilities we have. Kate, I know how much you love your dogs. I'm sure in addition to just being about you, it's like, how do I support them? Right. And they have health issues.
Yeah, especially because my older one has been having lots of health problems, and thank God I have insurance for him, because otherwise I don't know what I would have sold my house. It's like I would have just done my house if I had to for him. But I think about Topanga, the horse that I worked with at the first, you met her virtually, Kim, and she was a horse I worked with at the first rescue where I volunteered, and she was absolutely shut down, just completely shut down. She would stare at the wall of the stall, or she would just stare into space. She didn't interact with people, horses, anything. And I sort of feel like that's where I went, to an extent. Like over the last year, it's like lots of TV, lots of sleeping, just lots of just like hunkering down and just,
Yep. And so you hit it, like horses can get to that place too, right? And in the book, partly we talked about the herd, like community, like what, I don't remember which chapter. I didn't actually like reread this one to say, was this in this chapter? But we talked about, what horses run toward, what is safe to them. And there's in a state of crisis, how do we go through our process to make sure we're okay? And again, then they're really just talking about their own safety in that moment. So that's aside from this like long-term chronic anxiety. And they'll make plans to avoid certain situations if they read it as scary. You know, like I said, they'll figure out when a crocodile or a lion is in hunting mode and when they're not. When do I need to be afraid of it? When do I not need to be afraid of it? And they're able to switch over to the, oh, I don't need to be worried right now. And this is maybe an art or practice that we can practice too, of that, like, I'm okay right this second. Yeah, even if it is going to be, I'm going to sit and watch TV, right? If that's what helps you. They use things, they use grazing, they use synchrony, right? They have tools that they use also to calm themselves. It's not like they're just masters at it. And a horse by itself is going to have a harder time usually. Whereas like, I think a horse like Kiko is used to living alone, also has other animals and other humans. Like it's not a completely isolated being. Kiko is not, but has learned, some horses learn to do okay without other horses. They learn to know that that environment is safe. But naturally, instinctually, horses usually want to be with other horses, and that's how they feel safest. And talk a little bit about the snake scenario, just so we can talk about some of the things that were in place with that. And maybe we can then think about how do we apply these to some other more complicated situations in the human world. But the first was that there was somebody in the group, thinking initially of just the family of 4. And actually that son had been bitten by a copperhead before. This is like the first person I've met who actually got bit by a snake and like had a really long 6-month recovery and everything. The child was actually not traumatized by that, but his mother was, as you can imagine, right? And the son, he was 8 when it happened, but he never blamed the snake. He understood exactly what happened. He surprised it. All of that. He just was like very mature about the whole thing. But the mother had, in that family, the mother had a very severe fear of snakes. And then the later family with the pictures was a father. I'm getting that my internet is a little unstable, so I apologize if I'm going in and out. But so in the first one, when we came inside to do the snakes with the family, we told the mom said initially, and I said, well, are you comfortable even being in the house? I let her decide where her comfort level was. And she said, yes, I can be in the house. I'm just going to sit over here across the room while you guys do that over there, and that will be fine. So the daughter was like super excited. The son and the daughter both really were interested in the snakes. The father, he was okay. He could be sitting next to them, but he didn't really care to touch them, but he wasn't really freaked out by them. The daughter and son were so into it, asking all these questions, wanting to hold them, letting them like crawl all over them. The mom was saying, see, that's what, and some of you might have been on the earlier one where many people said the slithering of snakes is what makes them scary to them. That this mother said the same thing. It's the slithering. So she got to sit in where she felt safe, in an environment where she knew these snakes, we knew they were not venomous. We told her they're socialized. So there were some things that gave her more confidence with it. And she got to actually just watch them, how they moved. We talked a lot about how they move. What is it? Like, where are they going? Why is it going there? And why it wanted to be on the people, because they were warm, right? And snakes are cold-blooded. And it didn't really want to climb around the room. It really wanted to stay on the human bodies because there was a source of warmth there, right? There was just all these conversations. And the more that she got to say, I understand snakes a little better, I understand what motivates them, I understand, I'm watching her, like she's really calm. She likes to be touched. Why is she like, anyway, so the mom starts getting closer without even realizing it, like wanting to take a closer look, right? She's starting to feel safer. And for her, she didn't hold it in that situation. Then later a group came with the party. There were more people. It wasn't until like 3 hours later when she then watched everybody else at the party interacting with the snakes, and the man who had come in so afraid overcome his own fear. And part of that was because his son was the one who was holding the snake and controlled whether, when he said, the dad said, I think I want to try it. And it was not me or Chris, who he didn't know that well, holding the snake. It was his son, who he trusted a lot. And his son knew how afraid he was. And his son was so sweet and was just like, how about, and he said, no, I want you to put it on from behind me onto my shoulders. Like the dad told him exactly how he wanted to do it. That's how he felt safest. And then did it and was kept saying, are you okay? Are you okay? And his dad was like, yes, yes, right. So he felt really, in both of those situations, the person who was afraid felt very in control of their proximity to the thing, when it was going to happen, if it was going to happen, who was going to, someone they trusted was going to do it, right? And they got to social learn first. They got to watch everybody else handling the snakes and interacting with them. So I know horses do a lot of that. They do social learning. They watch each other investigate, right? Whichever one is feeling, it's kind of like people in that family. The daughter was the bravest initially. She was the one that wanted to interact the most. She started it. In the herds I watch, whichever horse is feeling most confident in that situation usually comes forward, does the initial investigating, the others kind of watch, then they start to investigate, then they take turns, right? Everybody has their chance to do what they need to do, and they move back and forth or they circle around. So what are some of the factors in that I just described that are things that help someone feel safer or not as fearful?
Familiarity.
Familiarity, right?
Control.
Control,
Trust.
trust. Yep. So Kate, in your situation, familiarity, this was a new process for you, right? Applying for disability, going through this. I mean, you can read about it. You can learn, I'm sure you did, research everything you possibly could about how that process works, right?
Right.
Maybe got more familiar, but you hadn't been through it before.
No, I didn't trust my attorney. And yeah, it was just, it was very difficult to find any like footholds or, just where there was any comfort to be found with the process. So
yeah. And definitely no control, right? You didn't feel in
Very little.
control of it.
No.
Yeah.
They do what they do. Yeah.
So I would say part of the process sometimes is going through those qualities, familiarity, control, trust, investigation. Is it true? What can I do to make myself feel safer in this situation? Go through those criteria and then see, are there any of these that I can impact? And if we can't completely, then I think we go into more of that survival mode of like, am I safe right this minute?
Yeah.
Right. And just try to keep bringing ourselves back to presence instead of living in that anxious. Just say, I'm okay right this second. I can't control anything else, but right now I'm safe.
It's interesting to me, like, I partly because, I had volunteered. There's a seasonal women's homeless shelter where I volunteer. And I had met a woman who is a legal aid attorney who deals with disability. And I had met a lot of people through there who had been approved for disability or were waiting on the disability determination. And so it's like, I spoke with a lot of people who were very familiar with the whole process, but the theme throughout all of it, including with my attorney, who's like, one of the sort of like, big legal offices in this area, and they specialize in disability. There's a real learned helplessness culture around this, and like the attorney was like, there's basically no way you're going to get approved the first time. And he just kept telling me this, and every time he said it, I said, look, I understand that the odds are not good, but I assume that the odds are better if you have an attorney who does your application. And I assume you are doing everything possible to make sure that I do get approved the first time. And I said that every single time it came up, but he just kept saying it. And I'm like, it really pisses me off. It's like a lot of people end up homeless during this process because you're not allowed to earn any money while you're waiting, not a cent. Because if you do, they'll say, oh, you're able to work. Cool. Right. You don't need disability. But then once you're approved, you're allowed to work. So, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. it's a really punishing, it's just very punishing.
So
And
I
it
have,
feels
I have
like
a-
they'd rather see you die than give you benefits. Like that's how I ended up feeling. I was like, they'd rather see me dead than approve this.
wow. Does having gone through this process make you in any way want to find a way to support others who may be in that limbo? Or is that like, whew,
Ugh.
right now, that's too much to think about.
It does, it's like I'm really working through like now, like one thing is I'm really fully understanding like how much of my energy was being drained away by this just gnawing terror kind of,
Mhm.
and just how, I don't know, like I just feel so different just in this last couple of weeks. And now I'm figuring out like, now I got to figure out what I want to do with my life to like contribute to the world. And I'm in this kind of privileged position where I can focus on things that are important to me. And I need to be really purposeful and focused about how many things I'm spreading that across, because I just can't. And it's right now, I think it's basically horses and music. Like, I don't think I can do a third thing right now. I'm not even sure I can do both those things, but yeah, like, I had a pretty heavy duty corporate job before. And like, one of the things I learned to do very well was finding leverage where I could find it. And sometimes you have very, very little, but there's always something. It's like, there's always something you can do.
Yeah.
And, with this, like, that was really all that made me feel like I had any control over this, was just like, tweaking, like prodding at the attorney and reading and trying to figure out like, where can I do things to improve the odds of this getting approved? Like what?
So you actually were following that process. You were investigating and getting to know the process and figuring out what are the things you can influence, which
Yeah.
is what animals will do in the wild, like the crocodile situation of like, get to know everything about when are they most likely to be there. Are they more likely to attack if it's one alone? Like they would tweak their horses are very good at adapting. They'll tweak their behavior to try to limit the amount of stress or exposure to a danger that they have. And that's kind of what you were doing in the little realm of space that you had control over.
Yeah.
But now the beautiful thing is you should spend some time just getting back into your parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to monopolize the conversation. It's just like this, the fear thing is like very, very present for me. Like, yeah. And like, I've seen so many people in the last couple of weeks who are just, it's like people who didn't know that this had changed. And they were like, something's different about you. It's like, they just see it right away.
Yeah.
And it doesn't surprise me because like I said, I feel like my entire being was just this like lightning rod.
Well,
Yeah.
I think you've seen it because you've done a lot of work at rescues. You can see that same look or that same, you can see it in the animals too, when they're either shut down or they're in that state of, I cannot feel safe. I'm worried, I'm anxious, I can't let go. They have the same situation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Who else has a fear story or a fear situation or a success story with a fear?
I don't know so much that I have a story about it, but I wanted to mention something that I appreciated in reading the chapter. It's just, it's sort of a recognition of the fact that it's okay to recognize you're afraid.
Yeah.
In that moment, like you said, in humans, we're sort of conditioned to, cover it up and not look weak. And I thought, no, it's important. It's okay to in the moment go, whoa, that caught me off guard. That's scary. That makes me worried. That makes me anxious. And identify it. I mean, you don't have to tell everybody, but maybe, it's okay to be going through that process and be open about it, I guess. not look like you've got it all together every second. And then to transition into what you were talking about. Okay, well, now I'm going to investigate a little bit if this fear is something not legitimate or not. It's legitimate to feel it, but how much do I need to stay in this level of anxiety? Or, how it's okay to ask questions that seem like you're a little worried about things, being in the medical field, a lot of times you want to look like you've got it, you don't want to look worried. And I understand in some situations it is important to kind of keep it calm, but also just in life to be able to look like I'm a little afraid here and I'm working it out. I'm working on it, but allow me to just look a little afraid and not, I don't know. That's what I kind of took away from that chapter, and the fact that then the horses they moved away from the area of the trampoline. And it's okay originally to move away. I felt like initially it's okay to let yourself move away and say, hold on, I'm not sure that's safe. And I want to more further evaluate, and I don't want to stand there and just submit myself to something that may not be safe. And it's okay to take time. I'm not saying forever, but to take time and just investigate it a little bit. I just really appreciated reading that. So that was.
I love that, what you just said. And I really helped me think about this, but I think humans are the only species that I know of that suggest you should hide your fear. I mean, horses, they're all out. They're afraid. They're pretty much gonna snort, whatever, run. They're gonna let you know. Dogs usually are going to let you know whether they go into the sort of barking, aggressive sort of fear, or running off or scurrying off. Cats, I don't know. I don't know any other animal that they think it's smart to pretend you're not afraid.
You're the stupid one.
And
right?
We don't want our dogs to growl, but they're growling because they're worried.
Yeah, they feel
the
insecure.
situation, and they're giving you a clue of I'm not okay with this. You know what I mean? And we're like, oh, they growl. We don't want them to growl, but I'm like, no, they're expressing their uncertainty or their fear, or, their anxiety.
Well, that's actually just another really great point, because we talked about this with the snakes is, so say one of you is really afraid of a snake. I have a snake. If I'm walking towards you with a snake and you're like, whoa, don't like snakes. And I stop and I go, oh, you don't like snakes? And you're like, no. And I'm like, oh, come on, snakes are fine. And I start bringing the snake towards you, right? How does that make you feel about me? You don't trust me.
Just so every horse trainer ever existed.
Exactly.
Sorry.
We tell them oh, calm down. Anybody ever tell you when you're really nervous, calm down, you don't need to be afraid? It's you want to punch them, right? It's you can't tell me not to be afraid. I'm afraid, right? You calm down. It's this crazy thing that you can't tell someone else to stop feeling what they're feeling. That person, that individual has to go through their own process of deciding for themselves. Maybe it helps if I see you be brave. That can very much help me. But I still have to decide when I feel okay, right? So that's just an insanity that we do. We do it to animals. We tell them to calm down, stop barking, you're okay. I even find myself doing it to my horses. You're okay. And then I look at Tempo's eye and she's like, you can keep that opinion to yourself. Yeah.
I used to do that with my dogs, it's and sometimes they do bark excessively, but they're not crazy about it. But now, when they start barking, I go over to the window and I'm like, hey, yeah, what are you looking at? What's going on? I'm like, thank you for looking out. Thanks for guarding the estate. And,
Right?
it's just acknowledging, whatever they're seeing. I don't know. It's just the right thing to do,
And, we forget that with the fact that we have them in a house, they can't go investigate that thing the way that they would want to. All they can do, they're anxious because they can't complete that process, right? Of deciding whether this is okay or not, or do something about it. They're kind of caught in an anxious cycle then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
mentioned too, maybe you didn't use the word, but that humans are discouraged from showing it, supposed to hide it, but it's beyond discouraged, or even like you said, like people like then push you to not be scared. There's a shame, it's downright shaming. Like people are really mean and shaming about it. And I will have to say, and I have a very strong opinion about this, I'm not saying it's based on research, but I think people are ashamed. Any deep emotion, well, not deep emotion, ashamed, but people are threatened by other people having deep emotions, because then that reminds them of the emotions that they're too scared to look at themselves. I mean, it's always something that resonates in them.
Yeah.
But it's just really it's just very sad.
It is. We're conditioned from a very young age, to hide a lot of different emotions, but particularly fear. You hear kids a lot of times being, Halloween, Disney characters, whatever, like things that feel very scary to them. And, we're just mocked or told to suck it up or be brave, or, and those can be terrifying experiences for the kids for whatever reason. Like you can't say why someone else is feeling afraid. But yeah.
I wonder where that started with humans.
It goes, and it's true in the horse industry. I know, you get shamed for being afraid to get on a horse or get back on a horse or whatever. Like if that horse is too much for you, you get made to feel like you're just not good enough or whatever, when it's like, having been someone who broke my neck riding, it's like, if you're afraid, go ahead and get off. What are you really going to lose? But we are definitely taught not to honor those fears we may have while riding too. So it goes into that, or handling a horse, right?
I'm curious what you all think about this. Like, is desensitization still the main mode that people use for trying to get horses to become bomb proof? Like, that just seems like what we do to ourselves, just like, that's not scary. Here, I'm going to wave this flag in your face. Like, it's not scary, right?
Right.
That was also a really popular form of trauma processing for people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like even people, vets in combat. And from what I hear, I never did it. It didn't seem right to me, that it somewhat maybe effective, but over a long, long period. But you're also in a way re-traumatizing every time.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the situation. But I'm guessing they still do that with desensitizing.
I think it's still it's kind of the primary traditional mode. I think there definitely are people looking at different ways to approach it, but it's still definitely wouldn't you say, Anna, the predominant?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I feel like, there's a crowd for everything. There's a crowd that's about desensitization. There's a crowd that's about the just get over it. So it does. There's so many camps out there. But I think for me, like one thing that actually kind of weirdly parallels with that and what you were saying about, telling people to calm down. Honestly, I tell people to calm down all the time, because I need you to calm down. I understand that you're afraid. I understand that you're whatever. Okay, that's cool. You can be that, but I still need you to give me answers to my questions right now. Right now. If you want me to help you, it's got to be right
life
now.
or death.
Right.
You have a job that you're trying to get done.
Right. So, and it's not even like it doesn't matter to me one way or the other, really, whether you get help or not. Right. Like, I mean, yeah, it's my job, but it's not like this is your problem, not mine. Right. So I really need you to help me. And I kind of started to realize, like, with horses, with dogs, with everything though, if they get to a point where they're not safe for us to be around, we have to have a stop, right? We have to have I need you to be here right now. And then we can work through whatever, and sometimes that's if you have the luxury of removing them from the situation or whatever. But, if you're going to work with them, you have to have something that,
you just said though, something that's really, I think, important is like, if we have to work with them.
Right.
So we've created a situation that's an unnatural situation, and there's a lot of those in the human world, right? So the same with like, I
Right.
have a job to do, or I have this to do, like this is something that has to, so we have to work within those parameters. So that's a whole nother layer that's really, really important, is
Yeah.
the scenario as is existing doesn't allow us to go through the natural processes in a natural way, or to let someone else go through them. Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's a whole nother, then it becomes like, everybody's going to be like, I got to do what I got to do to stay safe.
Right. And
The
then,
horse is going to be trying to do that. The human's going to be trying to do that. And someone's
Mhm.
going to have to win in that
Right.
scenario. Yeah.
and then who gets to decide? Like,
It depends on the,
Yeah.
with that, it's like whoever has the strongest intention, right? It's amazing that sometimes horses let humans win. A lot of times they do.
mhm.
But then there's those horses that don't, right? And the human loses. Yeah. Yeah, the 911 though is an interesting situation. Yeah, because if people call 911, they're obviously in a situation where they don't feel like they can control the situation, like they need
Right.
help, right? So then it's like you have to ask them to behave in a way that allows you to get them help.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a and in some ways that goes to what Kate was saying, which is like where you're relying on someone else to be able to provide the thing that's going to make you feel safe,
Right.
because you
And-
can't do it yourself.
Right. And thinking about that, made me, over the years, it's made me think about, like, horses that come from bad situations. I've had a lot of off the track horses, um, and just like the trauma that goes along with that. But you, you know, to try and help them get over that, and still live in this domestic world, because obviously I can't, turn you out to be free and wherever, we have to have some boundary, right? So,
Yeah, and all of that is making me think a little bit about so there's fear and anxiety and those things, and then there's trauma, right?
Right.
And there's trauma responses that we can have that can make fear and anxiety responses maybe even more extreme, or not as not in proportion to the fear that the thing that's actually there. And then this might seem kind of crazy, but it got to me thinking even about like mental hospitals, or somewhere where like when someone sometimes needs to be somewhere where all the stressors are taken off, and let's just get us back to our more normal way of functioning. And I think that doesn't happen sometimes, unfortunately, for horses. They're not given that opportunity to just like, let's just take all the pressures off and try to let you get back to a state where you're functioning more normally. Instead, we have to use training and conditioning to keep them safe, even though we may not be really addressing the root problem, which is they still haven't gone back to feeling more of that in that what is it, parasympathetic is the calm, right?
Right. Yes.
Right.
That's what you said too.
Yeah, yeah. But the one thing that I do think horses, and I would imagine most animals do, is they're trying to get back to that state of calm again. Like that's where they want to get to. I think we do too. We just don't always feel like we are in control of being able to do that, or we think we're not. Maybe that's it. We think we're not.
Maybe, yeah.
Is there, okay, so like the place where I'm currently volunteering, like the places where I've worked before were all contained. So it was like if I needed to turn out a horse, I would literally just open the stall and they would be out in the pasture. It was just one big space. And the place where I'm working now has like 8 paddocks. So I'm, walking horses. I mean, sometimes at distance and sometimes like in the dark, and there's no lights there, which is pretty weird. So one of the things that I worry about now is just like if a horse sees something or hears something or smells something and starts to freak out, and now we're like out in the open and we're not in the paddock yet, like what the fuck am I supposed to do to calm it down? Like how do you support, like when you see a horse is starting to have a reaction to something, do you guys have any tips for like helping it, supporting it to calm down so that
Yeah,
it doesn't
like my
any-
biggest tip would be go back to where it was felt safe.
Mm,
Like if you're taking it away from a safe place and it's starting to get nervous and you're feeling like this is a dangerous situation, some people tell you to push through that. I would say if you want to be safe and you want the horse to be safe, go back to where the
go back
horse,
and yeah.
abandon the agenda,
Yes.
right?
Abandon the agenda, right?
As long as like the world isn't going to end if you abandon the agenda. Or my other one is always like I tell people, and I don't know, when you're working for someone else and they have rules at their barn, but for me, if I had a horse on mine and it got dangerous and I couldn't, I'd let go of the rope. I'm going to let the horse be in charge of itself. Like maybe it might trip on the rope, might injure itself that way, but the chances of me getting seriously hurt and maybe both of us getting even more seriously hurt is if I'm trying to contain that energy.
Right.
That is 1,000-pound animal on adrenaline, right?
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
usually end real well for anybody.
Yeah.
But those are choices. And again, like we're create a lot of situations with animals and with ourselves in the domestic world where nobody can get to where they feel safe. And so part of why we stay in that state of anxiety, right? Because this is a dangerous situation. When you're connected to 1,000-pound animal in the dark and you don't know, that's potentially a really dangerous situation. Right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
I,
but then it's like,
yeah.
then it's staying present. It's staying present. If the horse is calm, we're okay.
Yeah.
Right. I don't need to have anxiety about it when it's okay right now. I just maybe I need to think in advance of what will I do? What are my options if things start to go south?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's again that let's not deny the possibilities that it could happen. Let's let ourselves play it out.
Yeah.
I love playing out worst case scenarios with horses.
Yeah.
So that I know
That's what I'm trying to do, because it's like I haven't had fortunately I have not had a situation so far where there's an issue or taking one out of the paddock, but I'm just like, this is not really a familiar activity for me, and like I just want to sort of I like to practice in my mind, like what am I going to do, like if there's an emergency, like what is the best thing to do, because I'm not going to just be dragged or trampled or whatever, like that's not and I can't, it's like you can't control it anyway, so
Yeah. And I think be very deliberate with your visualization. Like when you go, I mean, you may not know ahead of time what you're exactly going to do, but when you get there and like I have to take this horse out to the paddock, like have a very clear picture in your mind of us walking calmly to the paddock. And like some people might think that sounds weird, but
no, I don't.
I would even take it a step further, like visualize it, be very clear. And then I would say, have a chat with the horse.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Like, I don't
know.
I sometimes think like they sense that energy of, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to get you. I know I'm going to need you to back up. Right. So that you come out, you're not coming out. Like I try to talk to them about, it helps me get clear about all the energies I'm dealing with, but I do think it helps them too. Right. Of feeling a little bit of that out. Yeah, don't worry about people thinking you're crazy.
I appreciate that you do that too. I talk to them all the time and I'm like, I know you don't speak English, and like, you know that I don't exactly speak your language, but they understand a lot.
They understand a lot. Probably way more than we give them credit for, right?
Yep.
And one thing I think they really do read is when we're not sure. And like, think about when you're with someone who you don't feel like confident that they even know what's happening, and then things start to go south, you are more inclined to be like, let me take a little bit of control here because you don't seem to be aware of all the things that might be going wrong here, right? So I think horses appreciate if we kind of are like, I understand everything that's happening here, all the dynamics, it's getting dark, that gate's over there, that guy's about to start his car. Like the more we can be noticing all the things that the horse might notice, I think they feel more safe with us because they're like, okay, she's got a beat on things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Have you guys seen like there was a video that went viral, and it was these two horses and they were supposed to be coming in for breakfast, and like there was a bunny in the road. Have you seen this?
and they mock them.
Well, the woman mocks them, but there was a guy who like went and did
a
a
voiceover.
Yeah,
What he's
Ozzy.
saying,
His name is Ozzy. He did voiceovers of the horses, and it was fucking brilliant. I loved it, and I'm just like, you know, and he was mocking her because she was being a jerk, basically, and it was I don't know. I just thought it was really interesting and just a really great example of, you know, humans being stupid. It's like, well, yeah, it's small and they're big, but like it's an unfamiliar thing that's moving around and it's right in front of them. So of course it's gonna.
Yeah, he at least in his voiceover allowed them to own their fear and be like, you're crazy for thinking we shouldn't be afraid of a rabbit, right?
Yeah. Yep.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I get like, I want to give them that energy of just being like, yeah, I see that. That's weird. Like, you got to check that out. We got to make sure that that's okay. You know, like that's the energy I try to have with my dogs, just kind of like acknowledging, you know, they're seeing something, smelling something, hearing something that's unfamiliar, that's bothering them. And like, let's investigate. Let's see what that's about. Hopefully.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
think that's one of the gifts of living with animals, because we do live so numb, like we're so checked out to so many things. We're in our heads, we're thinking about the two things that are important to us right now. We're not noticing everything else, and the animals are not thinking about all those things, so they're noticing. I love when I think my horses are better than watchdogs because they don't bark or let anybody else know, but if I see them looking at something, I know there's something going on in the neighborhood that's not usual, and it's pretty cool to usually figure out what it is that they're seeing. It's something, right? Yeah. So those, I think they can help us get more present.
Yeah.
Yeah. What other fears that aren't maybe so practical? Health. What about health fears? I think a lot of us have health, right? So how would we apply some of this wisdom to fears about health?
It's hard for me to get in it. Tim, you know what's going on with me, but like there's some real, I mean, we're getting older, my husband and I, and my parents are 92 and 95. And my son was diagnosed with a chronic, it's type 1 diabetes, but that was like in I guess April, but it's just been, the horses really helped me, and Kim helped me, and it's kind of like a circular thing because Kim was hearing from the horses, and then I was hearing from the horses, and just being in the moment, just in general with just all of it, because there's just a lot of uncertainty, and it just, even if there was a cure tomorrow and that all went away, there's just certain different awareness of just how the body works, and just how, like my son, and of course I love him to death. I think he's the most clever person in the world, but he's like, bodies are terrifying. It's just terrifying to own a body, because he's in a physics program, so he's very analytical, and he really got into the research and figuring it all. And the more you, just to me, I could freak out and I don't want to trigger anyone's anxiety, but if I really start thinking about my heart beating, just kill me. Like, because the anxiety it just kills me. You start thinking about all the things, like it's a miracle we're just, any of us are walking around. It's just so complex. I'm not trying to be negative. I just really, my whole family, we all believe, me and the nuclear family, my two kids and my husband, we sit around like, I don't even know how this is working. And none of us
Bodies are amazing though, right? Like,
but it really is amazing. But
like,
the
things
horses
can go crazy wrong, but it's like amazing how much works on just on its own, right? It just does it.
and then when things go wrong, you realize how hard it is to right the ship. But with the horses, I feel like they're just so in the present. And that is the reality. There's many times through the grieving process, which I'm still going through. I mean, he's around, but just the grief of his health and stuff. I mean, he's 25. I would go out to the pasture, and there was just them being there. I thought, and some of them, maybe they were actually treated pretty well. Mine does nothing. Mine only has to be a horse. And the most they ever do is like a lesson a day. So as things go, they're being treated well. I'd rather than none of them be in lessons. But just the idea is it wouldn't even matter. Like in that moment, and like I find myself even saying it out loud, but it's what I'm getting from them energetically. It's like the sun is out, our bellies are full, the grass is green, no one's biting me right now, because sometimes they are biting each other. The bugs aren't too bad. And it sounds so simple, but the beauty of it, it just, those moments, those are the few moments I would get breaks, especially early on when all this stuff was happening.
I think that's really what life's about. And we just bypass those moments so often when there's just beautiful things to be grateful for, right? And that tell us we're okay right now. Yeah.
Because there is no guarantee for any more than that for anybody.
There is no guarantee. Yeah. I had a thought when you were talking about that. I've lost it for a minute. So you all go on. Maybe it'll come back to me. But
I mean, I can speak to how, and it goes a little bit to what you were just saying, Barbara. Like some of the I've managed a lot of my fear around my brain injury through trying to cultivate a sense of curiosity and just sort of intellectual inquiry, and it is partly also a practice of just being present, because like I've had visual hallucinations, I have had like sensory hallucinations where I felt things on me that weren't there, and I'm like, that's interesting. It's like all kinds of shit has happened to me. And like some of the early symptoms have cropped back up, in the last couple of months. And I don't know exactly why, but I'm like, well, brains, they're fucking weird, man. It's just, I'm like, it's interesting. It's really interesting. I'm like, instead of focusing on how scary it is, I'm just like, man, like that shit is weird. Like my brain is doing that. I didn't even know that was possible. And somehow it helps, and it's not the same. It's like dealing with type 1 diabetes. That's really scary in a really different way. And I'm not sure if like what I'm talking about is really applicable there, but I just know like that is one of the main things that's gotten me through this, because it's like you can read about what happens to people who have traumatic brain injuries, and I have, but like it's really different when you're experiencing it yourself. And just yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what else I'm saying. Just cultivating that sense of like just trying to be curious and observational about it really has helped me get by. So,
and that triggered actually what I had thought I was trying to remember when Barbara was talking, which is that sometimes these things cause us to pay attention to our bodies. And we realize how much we don't normally pay attention. And if we know what's normal for us, one, we can say that's normal for me. I've investigated it. Like, Kate, you feel things crawling on you, oh, it might probably may not really be. I'll look and see, right? But that's just what happens for me sometimes. And the earlier we can catch symptoms, or even just a sense that something's not right, we should pay attention to that. And I think we don't a lot of times in the human world. We want to convince ourselves we're okay. Like that's because there's so much fear about what if. And part of that in our human world too, frankly, for a lot of people, comes down to money. What is it going to cost to go to the doctor? What are these tests going to cost? Or am I going to lose my job, or am I going to not be able to do whatever, right? So we sometimes put things off because the consequences of what if is so big. Again, these are all layers that the human world adds on that make it much more complicated. Yeah. And you think about horses, like I think a lot of times they're much more in tune with what's going on in their bodies. I just wonder how often do they feel things where they're like, no, I shouldn't really be doing that, or that doesn't feel right. But like they're not dead lame, so we're not seeing it or whatever. You know what I mean? Like how often are they feeling things in their body? That we want them to ignore theirs just as much as we ignore ours.
What I heard, Kate, that you saying, and I think not so much the fear with horses, but I think there's definitely a parallel with them, is lack of judgment. I mean, the human in you goes right to judgment. Oh fuck, I'm decompensating, or I'm deteriorating, or I'm going backwards. But then when you go to just who you are, just if you stay away from that and stay in the present, I think a horse would just be like, let's be curious. What is happening, and how are we going to deal with what is happening in the present? And it's so much healthier. but so foreign for most of us.
Right.
But what, I don't think they understand judgment.
Yeah.
Not in their vocabulary. It's what is. What's this mean for me? Like in this moment, how do I deal with it?
There's a book, and I think it may still be out of print. I'm not sure, but there's a book by Mark Vonnegut, who's Kurt Vonnegut's son,
Hmm.
and it's called The Eden Express. And it's about, so like he grew up, I guess, in the 70s, and he was like, living on a commune and doing all kinds of hippie shit. And also, he was sort of in his early 20s, and he was schizophrenic, and he was, becoming symptomatically schizophrenic. And this book is like his memoir about his sort of like, I was going to say descent, and maybe that's not the right word, but whatever, his descent into
Progression, maybe.
The disease.
yeah. And it's it really affected me, just like the sort of, it's like to say that there's a clarity in how he described like losing contact with reality. It's a really beautiful book. Like if y'all get a chance to find a used copy somewhere, I really recommend it, because like I think I didn't think about that actually until just now, Barbara, but I think like just having that in the back of my mind, like his writerly approach, and he's a beautiful writer, to narrating his own I don't know. I don't know how to say what I'm
You
saying,
even
but
have that, he documented it basically, right?
yeah.
He got curious about it in some ways.
Yeah.
Instead of judging it, he was just in the experience of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I think animals give each other space for that too. Of like, okay, you're over there doing that. That's fine. Right? They don't really judge it. They're just like, okay.
That weirdo. Yeah.
Well, so
Oh,
if we
sorry.
talk about, so we've got fear and anxiety we've been talking about. What the opposite of that would be? What's the opposite of fear? Like confidence or safety.
Security.
What other words? What did you say, Barbara?
Security.
Security. So what are some of the things that, like, when do you feel confident? What makes you feel confident, safe, or secure versus fearful?
Investigation, actually. It's just like you described in that chapter.
The more you know, the more confident you feel, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Competence. Feeling competent at things makes me feel safer, or at least perceived competence, whether it's real or not.
But that's a great word right there. So like, I'm going to even play around with that. The next time I feel afraid of something, I'll be like, what would it, maybe I can't develop the competence necessarily, but if I can't, who can I go to that maybe is, rather than stewing on something, like just really like, what can help me feel like I have more of a handle on this.
Yeah.
But a lot of times I think we don't do that. Because maybe we feel embarrassed, we don't know, or maybe we don't even know where to go. Yeah.
I think just taking any action for me makes me feel safer, because even if it's not like the right action or something that's actually going to address the problem, I feel like at least I'm taking an active part in trying to address whatever the situation is that I'm in.
Yeah. I know definitely when I was in therapy, my therapist, my ex-husband had a lot of anxiety, which would then make me anxious too. And, her recommendation often was, what is it? What action can you take right now? Instead of worrying about later, so even just take something simple like, oh, I'm giving a talk tomorrow or a speech. I'm anxious about talking in public, right? Or I'm anxious about this thing. She would say, what can you do right now? What's going to make you feel safer? And it's like, oh, maybe, one thing I don't want to have to worry about while I'm there is what I'm wearing, or am I comfortable? Like, let me try on 6 pairs of shoes right now and figure out which ones I'm going to feel comfortable standing in for that hour. Or you
Yeah.
know, or I could practice my speech in the mirror, but whatever little steps I could take to say, this might help me feel more secure when the time comes. So let me go ahead and just focus on that thing right now, because I can control that thing in the present moment, where I can't control what's going to actually happen when I get there tomorrow. Right. Yeah.
This is making me think of something, and I found it. I'm very bad at details and sources, but I know I heard this from someone reputable and read about it, but I found it brilliant, and I probably should have remembered in the beginning, but it happens when it happens. So, and it's so interesting too, so we're talking about animals versus humans. We're obviously animals, but we've evolved into this. To me, the technology and so many things are so way ahead of our nervous systems and our ethics and our just capacity to emotionally deal with any of it. But I found it really interesting. And they said, so, and I'm really bad about history and where people were with dinosaurs and saber-toothed tigers and things, but let's just go back when we were more animals. So like prehistoric, if we were there, whatever, first, early humans.
Yeah.
So you're getting attacked by a big animal. It's really scary. You physically discharge that fear that you either run like hell, you get your family, you run like, or you battle the thing, or maybe you die, or maybe, I mean, and that's awful, but you physically do something about it. So it's really simplistic. But in this book, they were talking about how now we can't do that. You go to work, you sit in a meeting, and someone just dumps like months and months of work on you, and you know you have days. Like but what do you physically do? Have a tantrum? Like maybe it would be a good thing to do. You go run, go on the treadmill, go do kickboxing, do something like that. But as physiological animals, we can't discharge this thing. And he was just really talking about that mind, and that is where stress starts eating away at our gut and our just bodies. And there's a bunch of books now about how just we just with the stress destroying our bodies, because if we don't stop ourselves, our bodies will.
Yeah.
If the body keeps the score, there's a few really good ones out there. And this other one, I think this is Peter Levine actually that I'm talking about. But in any case, I just found that really, really useful. I don't always do it, but it reminds me. So sometimes I'm literally like, I say to my husband, like, I got to get out in the dirt, or not only go see the horses, but like walk around, like, because that physical.
Actually discharge some of the energy.
Yeah. And they all talk about exercise and how good it is for stress, but they don't explain it.
But then there's also the exercise that can kind of cause stress too. Like if we're not just enjoying the discharging the energy, if we become
right. If it's very repetitive and you're being competitive, right.
Yeah, we could turn that into a source of stress as well. But in addition to like not being able to discharge, it's like the thing you brought up of like our boss comes in and throws this big project on us that maybe is a 6-month project. Like sometimes we have things now that the resolution to that thing is a long way away, right? Like in nature, a lot of things get resolved pretty quickly. Right, within minutes or an hour or a day, right? Whereas we have things in our lives now that sometimes might not resolve for a year or two or longer, and then it becomes about managing stress and keeping the anxiety under control, maybe breaking it down into achievable chunks, right, that are slower. But yeah, what keeps coming, everything we keep talking about is just like, how do we make it complicated in our human world, right? So getting back to the most basic strategies as often as we can. It also makes me think about horses and how often they don't feel in control of things. Like, gosh, like they must, they're probably living in a more anxiety than we think sometimes in the human world. Right.
Yeah.
Wait for moment to moment, wait for the next command, next guidance, the next thing.
Yeah.
So how do we wrap this up in a positive note? Let me think about so next time, let me just see what we're talking about next. The next one is leadership is meant to be shared, is lesson 8. So next time, and that kind of ties in. One of the things we haven't really talked a lot about today that came up with the horses and with the snakes is this sense of community and trusted community. And Kate, one of the things that made you feel so unsafe in this situation is you didn't feel like you had that to lean on. That So I think that's just something else for us to think about and to realize, or maybe just have empathy for ourselves, that in this human world, there's a lot of people who don't feel like they have trusted community, whether it's in the home, whether it's at work, whether it's in any of these places. As I do this work, some of you who've been in different groups with me, the thing I get feedback on all the time is just like these Zoom meetings of different Zoom meetings. They'll be like, it's a safe space. I just look forward to coming there because I know I'm not going to get judged. I know I can just be me. I can just show up for an hour. Right. And I realize how hungry we all are for that, that we, those of us who get to go out and be with the horses, maybe we feel it there, but it's not human community necessarily.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think that goes to, I'll try to like put a positive spin on that. Like, I've had a lot of unsafe people in my life, like long-term, like just chronically unsafe situations with people in my life. And like when I had this accident and I became a lot more volatile, I couldn't tolerate those people anymore. And it was scary because I lost like the most quote unquote stable relationships in my life, but they weren't safe relationships for me in the first place. So like, I think that level of discernment that my body has essentially forced on me, it's just like, if I don't like what you're doing, I'm out, and like possibly in a really explosive way. It sucks not having people, it sucks not having family, and it sucks not having like people that I feel like I really can count on. But on the other hand, like I'd rather know that than have a bunch of people in my life and think that they're really there, which is what I used to tell myself.
Yep.
But they're really not. So like, I don't know, choice. I think like choice is really important, and like really paying attention to what's going on. And like, I used to fool myself, and now I can't do that anymore. And it's like, it's a blessing and a curse, but I think for me, it's mostly a blessing.
And I think that's in line with the natural world. I think the natural world would say, I want to know exactly where things stand in any
Yep.
moment, because it's life or death in those situations to trust where you shouldn't or misread, right? So I love that you're able to see that as the aspect of it that's the gift that it is, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks.
And I had a really similar situation, even though it wasn't my diagnosis, with my son, because I was just put to such a high level of stress. It all just happened quickly. I don't want I don't need to get into the details, but there was just a few weeks that were really incredibly stressful, and no one really knew what was going on and no one was helping us. But then even subsequent after that, he's kind of stable, but still was just a lot of work. And people don't know about T1D, but pretty much you have to be a pancreas. They don't have a pancreas anymore.
Right.
And it's not an easy thing as a human to play to be a piece of the endocrine system, like the endocrine system, like an organ. Like it's very, very complicated. Right. But I started realizing people, and again, with me, I'm not cut off from them, but family members and close friends who I would have said, oh, they're there. Like I just had no tolerance for bullshit. So the boundaries just started like boundaries that should have been up 50 years ago just started. And Kim helped me with this, and the horses really helped to model it. But it was almost like all this work with the horses and Kim was building up to really needing boundaries. And certain clients like, gotta go. I remember Kim saying to me, like, if a client does not feed you back, they gotta go. Like, yeah, you got to make so much money, and there were certain pro bono clients that I couldn't hang on to. And I just got a lot fiercer about my own boundaries, but it pushed me to do what I had to.
Yeah.
I couldn't manage everyone's feelings and not be stepping on people's delicate little toes. Sorry if I sound so nasty, but it was just so, I'm always the accommodator, the peacemaker, the whatever.
We're all like, it's beautiful, right?
It just started. So watch out this holiday season. They're gonna all think I'm a bitch. It's gonna be beautiful and ugly, but very authentic.
But it's true. And it's like when there is an actual crisis situation, it's like all the stuff that doesn't matter anymore doesn't matter.
I don't know.
Like you get real clear real quick on what's important. And maybe we should be more like that more of the time.
Yep. Hey, the horses don't hesitate to tell us when they're pissed off. Not at all.
Or each other.
They do not do anything to please each other. I mean, yeah,
Not codependent.
because they
Well,
think
when they're
they're
healthy.
or it's socially polite. Yeah, they don't really do a whole lot. Most of them.
Yeah.
Anna, Jen, Shelley, any final comments or thoughts about the topic you want to share?
I actually felt it was a very positive talk. I mean, the stories that I heard, I really appreciate hearing them, and you guys being vulnerable to us. I really appreciated hearing about all of that. But I do think it was a very positive topic as far as, to me, sort of bringing something into the light. And recognizing it, to me, is a positive thing, even if it's a scary thing or a bad thing or whatever. So I thought that I really appreciated the chapter. I really appreciated hearing from all of you. So I thought it was a really positive thing.
Your last sentence in the chapter says presence is a powerful tool for keeping fear and anxiety in check. Humans are often distracted, preoccupied, and not present. So anyway, having everybody present and then there and accountable, so share that way. It's powerful.
That's beautiful. Thank you for bringing it back to that last point in the chapter also. And it does come back to it for all of us, like being present with what is actually happening, being present with what's truly important, being present with what we have the ability to do in terms of investigation, research, whatever right now. Yeah. And I would agree, Jen, that anytime I had a conversation recently with some folks, it was about death, but it was just the fact that everybody was there willing to talk about something that you rarely get to talk about, right? So again, with fear, most people don't really like to dive into it that much, right? We just don't talk about it enough. So
yeah,
thanks for being here to talk about it.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Well, and like I said, next time is leadership, about shared leadership, and what does that mean? And I would say, even with the family with the snake, with the son, it was beautiful to watch both the son and the daughter in the two different families step into leadership roles with the family in terms of like dealing with feeling more comfortable with the snakes. And there are so many myths about the way leadership is with horses, so many myths about it, but the truth, the more that they study it, ethologists study it, it is shared leadership. And that there are often even times when the young horses, the babies, will be the ones that decide where they go or what they do. And there's not this, basically it's just not the hierarchical thinking that we have. So I think next month will be really fun to dive into all the different places in the human world that we have created hierarchical structures, job titles, positions, even within families, right?
We do.
That have roles that certain people are supposed to play certain roles, and how that does not contribute necessarily to shared leadership and developing the skills around shared leadership. So that's going to be a fun one. So
Do you have a date yet?
I don't have a date yet, but
No pressure. I just didn't know. I didn't remember how.
It'll probably be one of the last 2 Mondays, and unless that's Thanksgiving. No, yeah, probably. I won't probably try not to do it Thanksgiving week because everyone just has a lot going on that week. So probably the week before that. Yeah.
So these are always Mondays. I'm just gathering that.
Well, I've been doing them on Mondays lately. That seems to be when I was doing them Sundays for a while, and I didn't seem to get as many people as on Monday.
Okay.
But if any of you have a strong feeling of I could do it on a different day of the week.
And that's fine. I'm laughing at myself that I didn't notice the pattern.
Didn't figure that out. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. This has been a great conversation, and I'll be posting the recording.
Thank you, ladies.
All right.
Have a good week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.